It's Thursday, June 23rd. Well, this could fuel some arguments. We start here. President Biden calls on Congress to halt federal taxes on gasoline.
We can bring down the price of gas and give families just a little bit of relief.
So why, with gas prices soaring, is this not getting more support from lawmakers? Well, for one, they say it won't work. It was the crown jewel of the vaping industry. Now, could it be banned from the shelves?
Actually, they can, and there's not much that Juul can do about it.
A new report says a shocking announcement is on the way, and the death toll has already soared past 1,000.
People are still being taken out of the rubble wherever it is possible.
An earthquake in Afghanistan puts whole communities underground and the Taliban under pressure. From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Brad Milkey. Remember all those stories this time last year about how bosses just could not find anyone to hire? Like, if you were a worker, you were in hot demand.
It's been really hard for us to hire people. And that's why we had to raise our rates $2 an hour.
That usually means pay will go up, and it did. By the end of 2021, the average worker was earning nearly 5% more than the year before. Great news. The problem was they were also paying 7% more for all the stuff they were buying. When you add it all up, workers are losing money right now, especially on something like gas.
I remember the good old days when it was like still under $4 before the pandemic. And
we can't afford to keep coming to work and not be able to afford the gas.
We don't know what to do because the prices are increasing every single day.
If it cost you $50 to fill up your tank at the beginning of last year, that same tank costs $90 now. You live in the same lifestyle, but poof, an extra $40 out of your pocket every single time you fill up. It's the single most noticeable area where you're going to feel inflation crushing your bank account.
Today I'm calling on Congress to suspend the federal gas tax for the next 90 days.
And so yesterday, President Biden announced he wants to put a dent in those gas prices the only way he knows how, by halting the federal taxes you pay at the pump. Let's start the day with ABC's White House correspondent Karen Travers. Because Karen, I never think about taxes when I fill up the tank. Like, the price on the board is the price I pay. So how much money are we talking about here?
18.4 cents per gallon. And you're right, it's just absorbed into the price. You know, you pay your cash or you put your credit card in and you start filling up and the money ticks up and it keeps going and going because it's really expensive right now to purchase gas.
By suspending the 18-cent gas tax, federal gas tax, for the next 90 days, we can bring down the price of gas and give families just a little bit of relief.
So the president is proposing a 3-month federal gas tax holiday from July through the end of September, where Americans would not be paying that 18.4 cents per gallon. He says that this is something that can help give Americans just a little bit of breathing room as his administration works to try and bring down gas prices over the long term. But it's not his decision.
What the administration, of course, is coming up with is yet another gimmick, another Band-Aid, and something they know is dead on arrival up here in Congress.
So yesterday, he was calling on Congress to authorize the suspension of the federal gas tax. They would have to pass it. He would then sign it into law for these 3 months. And it's not looking great.
The holiday the American people need is a holiday from Joe Biden's terrible energy policies.
There is very little appetite right now on Capitol Hill to do this. And, you know, the president's clamoring for this because he wants to show Americans he's trying to do something, but there's a lot of resistance to this right now. And, you know, it's the summer driving season. That's the simple answer of why now? And that was asked yesterday at the White House briefing. What is it about right now? And they just said, hey, Americans are driving. Americans are going on vacation. We know people are feeling it.
People want to get out and return to some sense of normalcy. A lot of folks have saved money during the pandemic, so many of them are begrudgingly willing to pay the extra price to be able to travel again.
You got to think about this, though. Like, you got to get Congress to pass it. Those things take time. You can't just say, like, poof, Congress passed this, and they're going to get it done in a weekend.
But why would it be difficult to get a consensus? Because as a driver, like, this sounds great. And it also sounds,
right,
for a politician, like it would be a no-brainer. What voter is not going to love this? So I got kind of confused seeing pushback from both sides of the aisle, really.
Yeah, I mean, the most interesting response, yesterday came within minutes after the president finished talking. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi put out a statement that was lukewarm at best, where she essentially said, "We'll see."
Which politician up here is going to be voting to put that 18-cent tax back on a month before the November election?
There's a couple different reasons why there's opposition to this. One, let's just kind of look at the politics. Some Republicans will say gas prices are a drag right now on President Biden and his administration. So just from the sheer politics of it, are you going to try and give him a win right now when you're heading into the midterm campaign season? No. Figure out another way to fix this problem, Mr. President. We're not going to bail you out here.
The pro is very showbiz. Okay, let's just do something. There it is. But it is not necessarily landing in the pocket of the consumer. It's taken out of the trust fund. We have to pay for that to return it.
Another thing that they're citing on Capitol Hill is that this would cost $10 billion in revenue. The federal gas tax goes to the Highway Trust Fund. That is used to fix roads and highways and bridges and things like that. That money is put aside to pay for things. So if all of a sudden you stop taking it in for 3 months, that's $10 billion that's not coming in that, would actually be spent on something else.
With the tax revenues up this year, and our deficit down over $1.6 trillion this year alone, we'll still be able to fix our highways and bring down prices of gas.
The president earlier this week brushed that off, saying, we've got plenty of money. We had a big infrastructure bill, and we've paid down the deficit. We can work out the numbers a different way for 3 months. We'll figure it out. But interestingly, when people don't like a proposal, suddenly everybody gets a little squeamish about the accounting on Capitol Hill. So that's one of the things. There's also a concern that, the savings might end up just getting absorbed by some of the oil and gas companies, or that if you do start giving a little bit money back to Americans, maybe it ends up making them buy more gas, because if they're actually paying a little bit less, they're thinking, oh, good, I'll take that longer trip I wasn't going to take. But the bottom line is there has not been a very big outburst of support for this move by the president. And frankly, Brad, the White House seems to realize this. If they really thought that Congress could do this, they would have announced this a month ago, gotten all the ducks in a row, and got it in place to pass it, to make it actually count for July, August, and September.
And just to pin down, you mentioned earlier that the price might not actually go down. How would that be? Because the gas station is the one tacking on the extra 18 cents per gallon, right? So if they chop that off, boom, I would pay $3 or $4 less every fill up, wouldn't I?
Yeah, and this is part of the thing that the president was talking about yesterday, too. He said one of the things he's calling on, first, the federal gas tax holiday, a state gas holiday. He's calling on these oil companies to produce more capacity, and also calling on gas stations to start reducing prices.
These are not normal times. Bring down the price you are charging at the pump to reflect the cost you are paying for the product.
The president last week sent a letter, really blistering letter, to 7 major oil refiners for the record profits he says they have right now amid the war in Ukraine. And he's calling on them to produce more diesel and gasoline, saying that their profits have tripled during the war in Ukraine, while Americans are really suffering at the pump.
This is the time to reinvest those profits that will enable them to better meet the needs of our citizens. And instead of using it for shareholders or stock buybacks.
And today, the Secretary of Energy is going to be sitting down with some of the CEOs from those companies, what the White House is calling a first step in a conversation to trying to get them to rein in prices, to rein in their profits. It's interesting. The president, who sent that blistering letter last week, he's not meeting with them. They're starting this off with the Energy Secretary. A lot of questions over the last few days about why the president, who put them on notice, isn't the one starting these conversations with these oil executives.
Right, and just fascinating to think that you get these Democrats that are like, we don't want to see the public benefit of these taxes go away for something that's not going to work. And you got Republicans saying, we're not going to hand you a win for this little temporary thing. Give us something that's more long-lasting if you're talking about giving American consumers a break. Karen Travers at the White House, seeing all the angles. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Next up on Start Here, could an entire industry just vaporize overnight? We're back in a bit.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi! Is this mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasure that day. I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby. It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Elizabeth Holmes found guilty on 4 counts of fraud, facing the possibility of decades in prison. Now, we take you inside the courtroom and behind the scenes. The Dropout, Elizabeth Holmes on Trial. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
National parks are incredibly safe places. A crime will happen.
My wife had fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
We were creating the perfect Mormon family. And then I fell in love with my friend. Yeah, I'm like stupidly in love with her. Leaving the church was leaving who I was. The lesbian ex-Mormon story is not something that's been shared very much, but I feel like our story needs to be told. Nobody tells you when you're Mormon is that there actually is another way.
The King of the Water is back. Nat Geo's Shark Fest is celebrating 10 years with 4 weeks.
Doesn't get much better than this.
27 new premieres on more platforms than ever before. We know sharks. We know experts.
This should give us some really good data.
Whoa. We know you can't get enough. Shark Fest starts Sunday, July 10th.
On Nat Geo and Disney Plus. Tomorrow in GMA, celebrate love, joy, and pride with one epic surprise and a musical performance. It's the live morning television event on Good Morning America.
We told you yesterday that the FDA is moving forward with a plan to try to cap the amount of nicotine in cigarettes. It's a ways off, but that would be a monumental move in the smoking world. But later in the day, another gigantic piece of news about smoking dropped that, according to one report, could happen almost immediately.
There are new reports tonight that the FDA is now preparing to ban the sale of Juul e-cigarettes in this country.
In the world of vaping, this could be the biggest action yet in that young industry. ABC's Ann Flaherty covers federal agencies, and this is coming from a report in the Wall Street Journal saying that the FDA could essentially just shut down production of Juul e-cigarettes. Like, what is going on?
Well, that's right. The Wall Street Journal reporting that the FDA is planning to order Juul Labs to take its e-cigarettes off of the market. I mean, this would be a big move by the government to try to regulate this. You know, it's essentially a $2 billion e-cigarette industry, and Juul's been on top of it for a while.
Like, I didn't think of myself as a smoker. The vaping just makes it seem like it's nothing, like you're doing nothing wrong.
Health advocates have always accused Juul and other e-cigarette makers of illegally marketing to younger consumers.
We never wanted any non-nicotine user, and certainly nobody underage, to ever use Juul products.
Juul has fought back and said, you know, look, we've taken steps. We don't want to market it to young kids. Our product exists solely as a smoking alternative, is what they say, that's going to help adults quit smoking. And you don't have to breathe in those carcinogens like traditional tobacco products.
Unfortunately, though, we still have over 2 million teenagers and children who are vaping today. And essentially, it's fair to assume that most of them are now addicted to nicotine.
FDA says it is still a dangerous product. It is still, nicotine can get you hooked. It will make people addicted.
Can the FDA just tell Juul, like, you don't make these anymore? Sorry, not now.
Actually, they can, and there's not much that Juul can do about it.
Going forward, FDA will be able to review new tobacco products before they hit the shelves.
Basically, the FDA got this power in 2016 to regulate e-cigarettes much as they do tobacco products. And they're specifically given the power to regulate how these products are marketed and how they're sold. So the FDA absolutely can do this. I've talked to experts, you know, is there any avenue that they can pursue on Capitol Hill, anything? And I'm told no, that if the FDA wants to do this, they can really shut this down.
What would be the FDA's purported reasoning? Like, why Juul, I guess, and not every other? Like, why not just ban all vaping products?
Well, you know, Juul has not immediately commented on this. I think that what they would say is that, you know, they've taken more steps than their competitors to pull back and to really check themselves. They stopped selling flavored vapes back in 2019.
But mint pods, which they say comprise about 70% of their business, will no longer be sold. And they've already pulled mango, creme brulee.
That's the ones that high schoolers and middle schoolers really, really want. But the FDA has been pretty consistent in its criticism of the industry as a whole, and Juul being one of the major manufacturers of this, saying that, you know, you're hooking another generation. There was a 2021 study where the government estimated that it was about 2 million middle and high schoolers were using e-cigarettes. It was about 8 out of 10 said that they had used flavored e-cigarettes. And the FDA has accused the industry of going after this young demographic to try to hook the next generation. So, you know, all these companies had to, because if you had a product on the market that was before 2016, you had to go to the FDA and say, okay, we're now going to file for an application to sell this legally. So the FDA has been wading through about 6.5 million applications of these products to figure out what is actually going to benefit adults to quit smoking, what is not being targeted to young people. And I think that's where the FDA is going to have a problem. I think they're going to possibly point to evidence that the Juul is one of the companies that's gone after that younger demographic. That's what they want to shut down. And as of right now, Brad, this is all according to the Wall Street Journal. I have called the FDA. They are completely radio silent on this. Juul is not commenting yet, so more to come.
Right, and the Wall Street Journal saying this announcement could be confirmed very, very soon by the FDA and Flaherty. Great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
When you think of Afghanistan in recent years, you probably think of war, insurgencies, man-made disasters. But the thing about political crisis and economic stagnation is that it makes a country even more vulnerable when a natural disaster hits. Well, yesterday in Afghanistan, an earthquake struck that immediately killed scores of people. Within 24 hours, this death toll has already risen past 1,000 and counting. ABC's foreign correspondent Maggie Rulli has been covering this. And Maggie, can you just break down what we know, what happened here?
Yeah, Brad, those numbers you mentioned, I think, are what is so terrifying and striking. At least 1,000 people have been killed. They say likely the death toll is only going to continue to rise. 1,500 injured, 1,800 homes reportedly destroyed. I mean, these are numbers that are just hard to wrap your mind around.
People are still being taken out of the rubble wherever it is possible.
but definitely more will emerge.
And it all happened because of a 5.9 magnitude earthquake. It struck in the middle of the night around 1:30 a.m. Most people were at home in their beds when this happened. It struck in the southeastern portion of the country in this area called the Paktika province. It's a very remote mountainous area.
We've got men moving the stones, the mud, the bricks with their hands. There's no sophisticated equipment up in these villages.
And these early images that we have coming in are really only because rescue crews are finally able to access these remote parts of the mountain to show us firsthand the vast destruction. And Brad, what we're seeing, I mean, it's terrifying. It's villages that have been completely wiped out.
And 5.9, like I've actually, that is not the biggest magnitude you and I have talked about in recent years. Why was this so incredibly deadly? Is it a structure issue, an infrastructure problem?
Yeah, exactly, Brad. It wasn't so much the strength of the earthquake, but where it happened. This province is very rural, it's very remote, and a lot of the homes in that province are made just from mud. They're mud huts, and that's already very vulnerable to things like an earthquake, but it also happened during monsoon season.
Those families living in one house, sometimes there's several families. An average size of an Afghan family is at least 7-8 people.
What we're seeing is homes that were just reduced to nothing. I mean, literally nothing, Brad. The images we're seeing, it's just piles of mud where people's homes once stood.
I'm thinking about this country in particular that's been through, like I called it, like a man-made disaster for a generation. Now you've got this natural disaster, and it's easy to forget that it is now a different government in charge. This is not the old Afghan government. This is the Taliban that runs the country. Now, they are the ones, I assume, that are going to have to deal with this.
Yeah, exactly, Brad. I mean, this is going to test not just their response, but really the global response to the Taliban as well. This is by far the largest natural disaster they've had to respond to, the largest humanitarian disaster. And there's a lot of questions. I mean, one is just how will the world respond?
The United States is the single largest donor of humanitarian aid to Afghanistan, and our humanitarian partners are already delivering medical care and shelter supplies on the ground.
When the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan last summer, a lot of foreign aid, international aid, was simply cut off. Now, the U.S. has said they're going to consider what to do next. And if they decide to offer aid, that's one thing. But then it's also, will the Taliban accept it? Or will they only accept aid from other countries? Does China get involved? So what you have is this humanitarian disaster that's now also becoming sort of caught in the crosshairs of a geopolitical game as well.
I do not think that an act of humanism, such as rescuing a person being trapped under the rubble, would be a subject of any ramification by the sanctions.
And Brad, what's sad to me is that it's all of this is going on. It's really the people on the ground that are suffering. You mentioned sort of at the top, you ticked off all those things Afghanistan has had to deal with. I mean, they're facing a severe food and economic crisis. They've dealt with, debilitating blows to their government, to their infrastructure. Right now, the UN estimates half the country's 20 million people are already experiencing acute hunger. And that was all before this catastrophe struck.
Yeah, interesting to consider whether the Taliban will work with countries in the West, whether they'll find different partners based on how their political tensions have ratcheted up in their short government tenure here. Maggie Rulli at our foreign desk. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
And one last thing. Whenever you watch a football game and the players are telling you what college they went to, there's one school that always gets a little extra emphasis.
Wisconsin Badgers prepare to take on the fifth-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. Hi, everybody.
That's right. You might have always thought of it as Ohio State University. Well, alums will tell you you're forgetting a word.
And look at me now. I'm an honorary graduate of The Ohio State University.
Yesterday, the federal government granted an official trademark to Ohio State. They now have exclusive rights to adorn certain products with the most common word in the English language.
When Ohio State first filed for this trademark registration 3 years ago, it took the trademark community a little bit by surprise.
That is a lawyer who specializes in trademark law.
Megan Bannigan, and I'm a partner in the IP litigation group at Debevoise and Plimpton in New York.
So here's what happened. A few years ago, Ohio State gets this bright idea to start making shirts that really emphasize the word the. Like, make that word larger than all the other words in the shirt. They applied for a trademark and were informed someone had beaten them to it.
Marc Jacobs actually spawned this whole thing.
That same year, the designer Marc Jacobs had applied for a trademark to name its new line, the Marc Jacobs.
Ohio State notices the application and they say, No. If anybody owns the word the on clothing, we do.
That's our thing. Wait, you took our thing.
Exactly. And if you look at their filings, they go back to the 1800s.
Apparently, this name goes back to the Ohio Agriculture and Mechanical College. The two sides got together and came to an agreement on who could use the word the in certain instances, and yesterday, regulators signed off.
And essentially, what they're doing is just pointing out Marc Jacobs sells to one group of people and OSU sells to another. So they can both own the word the in their respective spaces.
But Bannigan says, now, this doesn't mean you're going to get sued for telling people to shop at The Gap or Jack in the Box. You just can't make that word fashion.
Ending this 3-year rivalry with the United States Patent and Trademark Office.
If you want to get snobby about it, which Buckeye fans have been accused of more than once, well, in the modern trademark environment, Ohio State actually took way too long.
That's hot.
Paris Hilton quickly trademarked a catchphrase uttered by a generation of tweens. Tom Brady ticked off Mets fans when he tried to coin Tom Terrific, which had always been associated with Tom Seaver.
Let's dance.
And when NBA rookie Zion Williamson said, "Let's dance," as he was drafted, he was savvy enough to go and apply for a trademark on that the very next day. For Ohio State's part, they say this iconic wording will rake in money to benefit students, will disrupt potential knockoffs, and will keep the trademark industry booming for years to come. But just like, can I trademark Brad? Like, can I make it so that no one else can do that?
Absolutely. If you have
Oh my God, what am I doing?
It's all how you're using it and what you're using it on. But it, you can't own it for, you're the only person who's able to be named Brad.
Okay. As our producer Lewis said, if you see me wearing a shirt with "the" in huge block letters, don't bother telling me it's a trademark infringement. Try telling me, get a better taste in shirts. Hey, another big day in Washington today. We got our eye on Supreme Court decisions in the morning, January 6 hearings in the afternoon. You can keep up with it all at abcnews.com or the ABC News app, or just catch up with me here. I'm Brad Milkey. See you tomorrow.